going on, guys? Schmeck here. Welcome on in. Today we have a video on tanking in Season 10 of New World Aeternum. We're going to cover everything from the basics for consumables, skill trees, potential gear that you guys can get, a few things that are farmable for you all, and then, of course, a little bit of a play style breakdown, just so we have some examples of kind of how you guys can tank at a base level. I think the first thing we're just going to start with are consumables. And some of the things you guys should always be hitting, right, are your attribute food. I just like using roasted rabbit as a tank. And then, of course, a honing stone. Besides that, you guys have a few really good options for consumables right now. Oak flesh bomb and gemstone are very strong for reducing your damage taken just by increasing your armor rating. And this is something that you can use before you go into a fight or a clump. Serums are incredibly good for giving you a ton of health. Health pots are pretty obvious, right? And then grip pots are also phenomenal for uninterruptible and avoiding staggers. So if you wanted to do something like, use these types of consumables in an actual setting, I will give you guys a quick example. Let's say you want to clump these two, right? This trapper and the hunter. You could go into this, pop your oak flesh, pop your grit ward pot, and then you could post up, make your clump, and now you will have some grit for the beginning of the pool, and you will have oak flesh bomb to increase your armor rating to just make you a little tankier. That's kind of a basic acknowledgement of how you could use consumables. Alternatively, you could always pop a serum, but serums take up the same exact consumable downtime as your grit pot. So this will be kind of up to you to decide how you want to use, right? Next thing let's get into are some basics that every tank should have. And this is gear that you guys should get, okay? And I'll just equip kind of some of the basic stuff I've seen. The first thing that you guys should all be getting is running Lazarus for this heart rune. Stone form is the standard heart rune for all tanks. It gives you grit, it gives you fortify, and on some cases, even gives you healing. Generally, I always prefer this one here, hardened and fortifying form. I like the extra fortify, especially when you're in heavy. And then the reason I don't like mending is because you can see it reduces outgoing damage by 20%, which is a little bit counterintuitive, but it can still be good at times in certain scenarios. As far as artifacts go, there's basically 3 main artifacts that you guys should all be farming, okay? Those are going to be Void Darkplate, which comes from mutated barnacles and black powder expeditions. Power Stone, which comes from Soul Trials. This one's really easy to get. And then Blood Drinker, which comes from mutated Starstone Barrows. These right here are like the 3 mandatory items that all of you tanks should be getting. There are also 2 other artifacts that I think you all should get, which are the Unmoved, which come from the PvP track. These aren't mandatory, but you can definitely find cases where these will be very strong, and you might want to use them. Just check it out. Also, Featherweight comes from Elysian Wilds from a Corvid. I forget the name of it, but I'll post a link to it, and it's in my Discord. But he comes from over here. And this basically is the standard light tank, which obviously you guys don't have to do, but it's something that you should get if you ever choose to light tank. And this is the optimal armor artifact for that. All right. Next thing we're going to go into is some of the skill trees. And we're going to have 3 skill trees here today, okay? I'm going to stay away from hammer, and we're basically going to go into sword and shield, flail, and greatsword. Sword and shield and greatsword are going to be kind of your 2 main hand weapons, and I think we're going to actually start with greatsword here today. With the greatsword tree, we really have 0 room to cook as tanks. What you guys are seeing right here is basically the only greatsword tree you guys all should be running. I'm going to kind of touch a little bit on some of the stuff that AGS has done as well with the current patch. But basically in Season 10, AGS has nerfed the 300 con attribute with grit, which you guys see here. And this might be a reason why you're feeling a little bit pushed and pulled as of late. There are some counters to this, like Unstoppable, which is basically what 300 con was originally. But you kind of want to be using Blood Drinker very often, which means Unstoppable isn't going to be able to be used in most scenarios, right? And this is kind of where Grip Pot comes in, and this is also where Greatsword comes in. And this is where we're going to get into the skill trees. Greatsword is by far the easiest and best specifically for mob sections option for you guys to use as a tank, okay? Anything that's not a single target fight, I strongly suggest that you all use Greatsword all the time. With things like Rupture, which basically give you Fortify, Weaken, and the strongest thing it gives you is Uninterruptibility, which means just like a Grip Pot, you shouldn't be able to be staggered or hit out of what you're doing, which is phenomenal. You also get blocks on heavy attacks, which is insane. And you can see that from guard point when you're in the Defiant stance. And this basically means that anytime you're heavying, you're going to be able to block attacks so that you also don't get staggered, right? And of course, it also has damage taken reduced by 15%, which is very good for a tank. On top of that, Rupture has Grit, and you can use Calamity Counter as an AoE taunt or to block attacks that are incoming. The biggest thing from the skill tree is you also have Unflinching Blade, which means that your charged heavy attacks are going to have Grit, right? So now when we look at this from a little bit more of an actual tank perspective, you guys can see that you're going to have Grit from your Rupture. You're going to have 5 seconds of Uninterruptibility as well. You can block block incoming damage and attacks via heavies, and then you have a very long block that you can also use, which also has, yeah. So hopefully all that makes sense. And then when you take the left side capstone on the bottom left side, you'll be able to have an insane amount of CDR with your charged heavy attacks, so you really should be rotating all of these abilities as fast as you can. Things like Rupture is mainly meant for movement, and Counter is something that you can use a little bit more strategically, but something like Rupture is something that should literally be spammed. When you get Rupture up, just spam it. Just spam this ability all the time. Now, next skill tree we're going to get into is Sword and Shield. I will say that it's possible to use Upheaval as a tank, but for right now I want you guys using Whirling Blade because I think it's a little bit more of a skill cap and it will teach you how to use the weapon a little bit better. On top of that, you know, Upheaval isn't really needed for you to survive, and it doesn't give anything to your team, whereas Whirling Blade will do something like give Weaken when you're in heavy armor. So again, this is kind of the standard tree. You don't really have room to play with anything. You're kind of forced to take Final Countdown. You want this Weaken with Shield Rush, right? And then of course, these are all damage reduction, threat, and damage increasing perks. The only thing that you can really play around with is some of these perks over here. Freeing Justice is situationally good, but generally speaking, in most content, this is not going to have any value for you. There are some times where you could get like a disease or a rend, and it's possible that these can be cleansed, but more often than not, the debuffs applied to you cannot be cleansed, and Freeing Justice will just be a useless perk, right? You can see that between mobility and counterattack, you're forced to take a perk here. This is just preference. I've always liked mobility. I know other tanks have really loved counterattack. So besides that, you know, up to you however you want to do this passive here. A few things to really note about this tree is that look at some of the passives that we're going to take a look at these together. But Empowered Stab is really strong. It can give you really good empower for single target fights. Achilles Heel is really good because it gives you 15% rend on the final attack of your light attack chain. And this is something we're going to look at in coordination with another perk, right? Final Blow, which also does an increased base damage and additional threat. Point being here is that this is something you should be looking to do as a tank quite often. The third light attack in your chain is very important. It can build threat, it can apply rend. Try and hit that third light attack as much as possible. Besides that, two other things that are very important as a tank main is when we look at Power Stone, right? Power Stone with heavy burden causes 20% weaken. And then when we look at Sword and Shield, we can also see that our sword with Shield Rush and Whirling Blade is going to give an additional 20% weaken and 16% weaken. So this means as a tank, you guys can be doing 20% plus 16 plus 20, which is 56% weaken all by yourself. And in most cases, when you're doing raids or harder content, that's about a third of the total weaken needed to keep something at weaken cap. Now, what does this mean for your ability rotation, right? most of the time, it's really good that you guys should be thinking about spamming both Whirling Blade and Shield Rush so that Weaken has as much uptime as possible. If you're in a little bit more of coordinated groups, spamming Whirling Blade is obviously good, but using Shield Rush for yourself defensively because of Fortifying Shield Rush is also a very strong option. Also keep in mind that when using things like light attacks, it's really good to cancel the lag animation of the third light attack with an ability. So one thing that you'll see like more experienced tanks do is do stuff like this. 1, 2, 3, cancel the third light attack with an ability. Very, very good. Last main weapon we have here is Flail. And this is kind of the standard flail tree that you should always be locked into, okay? A lot of these other passives are not as important. And on top of that, the third ability that you take is very dependent on whatever content you're doing. The only one I would never take is Smite. I think Smite is really bad for a tank in almost every situation. But let's look at the 3 abilities, right? If you wanted to, you could take something like Arcane Eruption, which the only reason why you would really take this is for debuff extension. That's about it. And that's kind of a little higher end thinking, and we honestly don't really need to get into all of that. I think that generally Barrage is a very safe bet because this is a movement ability, and you basically have like permanent grit when you have your tower shield up, all right? So Barrage is really good for movement so that you can get away from mobs, and you can go through mobs if you're ever stuck. It's a way to get out of things. Now, if you were to use Flail in a single target fight, you would never use Barrage during the fight. It's literally just a movement ability if you ever think it's needed. The other option that you guys can use is Trip, which is pretty cool. And Trip does some actually pretty neat stuff. Knockdowns are very strong for a tank. So what you could do is you could actually engage in a fight by doing something like this. You run, trip the mob. Now he's knocked down, so this fight is very safe for the group to enter, and the group can easily kill. So Trip is a strong alternative, and on top of that, Trip does something cool where if you hit a weakened target, it does a unique rend. The Fortify isn't really needed, but the unique rend is kind of a cool option, right? Again, Flail isn't something you're really going to be on a lot for single target fights and bosses, but, you know, if it's a little value, it's a little value. And really these passives you can kind of put wherever you want. Don't stress too hard about it. These are kind of 2 that I like. Let's look at the flail tree a little bit more in depth now, okay? So the 2 main abilities you will always take will be Vortex and Warding Bludgeon. Let's go to Vortex first. So what we can see here is that Vortex gives a 10% in power. It also gives haste, and it gives haste to yourself with oppressive advantage in most scenarios. So Vortex is actually really cool because you can use it for your group and it has a lot of utility, right? You can cleanse your group from Flailbird, you can give your group haste, you can give your group a very small amount of healing, and you can also give them empower. So what this means is at the end of a pool, you could do something like this, right? Where you Vortex, you have haste, and now you're mobbing. So this is something that, again, it shouldn't be spam, but you can get small value out of it at times, and it is a really strong perk. Bludgeon, on the other hand, is something that you guys should be thinking about a lot as a tank. This is a really cool ability. And if we read it, we can see that you're going to be giving 50% Fortify to basically everybody in your group. So this means when you're in a boss fight, you could be thinking about a difficult time where you might want to give Fortify to your group, right? And then in that case, it's like, okay, everybody's grouped up on the first Jester fight in Isle of Night. He's going to do big damage and big attacks. It's a dangerous phase for my DPS. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to Bludgeon and give everybody massive Fortify, right? Really cool. On top of that, you also will get a little bit of value for yourself because, blah, 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 you also have Best Friends, right? And what Best Friends does is it's a tether. So you can see that right here, you can tether to a nearby ally, which will give them power, which isn't like that massive, but both will gain damage absorption, which is like phenomenal. This is basically a 10% damage reduction to you and somebody else, and it lasts for 8 seconds as long as you guys stay near each other. So this is something that can also increase your ability to survive, as well as help out kind of a random person in your group at times. Okay. Okay, we're done with the trees. So next thing we're going to go into are builds. Here we go. Oh, and then I guess last thing before we move on here, right, is that some of the big things we've gone over are sword and shield, flail, and greatsword, right? So when should you use these? I think that you should be using greatsword for mob packs, and you should be using sword and shield for bosses. In most scenarios, that's going to be your standard. Anything after that, it's really going to be up to you to figure out what you like and what you're comfortable with. So let's move into some builds, eh? And here's where the cooking begins. So there's a few interesting things here, and what I've done is I've created a spreadsheet for you guys so that you can all look into this. And I kind of have some things that I really want to talk about today. We're going to kind of go into a build here that I've done with the Tenacity set. And the first thing to recognize for you guys here, right, is that the PvP track is currently bugged, so you can't actually get these items right now. So hopefully AGS fixes this soon. And if they don't, then that sucks, right? Let's use something else in the meantime. So this was like really fun to do. We cooked this up just today. And one of the reasons why this set could potentially be so good is simply because it is the Tenacity set. And if we read the Tenacity set here, every time you're staggered, you'll get grit for 2 seconds, and then light attacks with grits will also give you 3 seconds of grit. And you get more lifesteal, which is absolutely insane. So again, this set will probably be the standard for most tanks if we're going down that safety route. What I've built for you guys today is a safety route that I would prioritize before you try and get into the min-maxy stuff of like enraged or doing more damage. We're going to stick on the safety side today because that's kind of what tanks should be doing, right? So if the Tenacity set is ever fixed, I think that this is going to be a very, very solid build for you guys. A few things to note, right, is that Enchanted Ward 2 is going to be your standard damage reduction perk for anything PvE. In PvE, almost all damage you take from mobs will be light and heavy attacks, meaning that Enchanted Ward 2, if you stack 5 of them, is basically going to be a 10% base damage reduction, right, for all damage that you take. So, you know, pretty good. The next thing, of course, is if you're actually using the Tenacity set, then Grit Ward is going to be very strong. On top of that, on top of Grit Ward being strong, we just saw that when you're using this set, you're going to take 5% more damage while Grit is active, right? But Grit Ward will directly counter that and will give you insane value. So 5 Grit Ward, 5 Enchanted Ward's kind of your goal. There might be a few ways to do that. And then, of course, your Dark Plate, you should always have Keenly Fortified Grit Ward and Enchanted Ward. That is just going to hard be the standard, okay? The other thing I wanted to bring up is Lifestealer's Drought. Lifestealer's Drought is fucking insane right now for you guys. I can't overstress how good Lifestealer's Drought is. If we look at it here too, right, you can see that it gives you 15% lifesteal and other lifesteals are increased. So this is fucking crazy, especially when you're stacking your own lifesteal with things like Blood Drinker or Leeching or anything else in your kit. So I would always have one Lifestealer's Drought no matter what. After Lifestealer's Drought, probably Prolonged Favor is best to extend some of your self-applied buffs, which are mainly going to be fortifies and base damage reductions, but you could also do a conditioning or something if you wanted it. I kind of wanted to look at some of these also infixes for when the PvP track actually comes back to the game. Tenacity Critical, kind of mid, but hey, you're a tank. It's free value, right? I wouldn't choose to take this if it probably wasn't part of the set bonus, but at the end of the day, it's a usable perk. Whatever. Insurmountable Gauntlets do not have an infix. You're kind of just taking these to get the the set bonus, basically. Two of the ones that I actually think are really good are Insurmountable Greaves. This does not have an infix, but it does have Prolonged Favor too, which is really cool. I also actually need to change that like this because I was a little bit wrong. So these Insurmountable Greaves are pretty freaking good because they come with Abyss perk, Prolonged Favor for you, Grit Ward, and Freedom, but these are just defensive slots. So you can put these as to whatever you want. So if you get the Insurmountable Greaves on the PvP track, you're going to be a happy tanker. And then I think this was the cool infix that I wanted to look at, which was Tenacity Recovery, right? Incoming heals increased by 10% while Grit is active. I'm not 100% sure if this works for lifestealing, but at the end of the day, it's still really good free value. The other thing you'll notice about these is it also comes with 2 defensive perks, which meaning if you get these Insurmountable Greaves and the Insurmountable Sabatons, both of these come with 2 defensive wards, so that this type of a perk setup is very possible for you guys. Awesome. Hell yeah. So let's look at the minimum gear real quick, right? We're going to swap over before we get into amulets and weapons and whatnot. But you guys can see that you don't really need to go that fucking crazy as a tank. All you guys got to do is kind of get these defensive ward slots, and I would prioritize this as the minimum. So what I've done here for you guys as armor is I've given you a gem slot with Void Darkplate, right? Your main priority should be gem slot and a defensive slot for Enchanted Ward 2. After that, perks don't matter as much, especially if you don't have the Tenacity set, but I would always try and get 1 Lifestealer's Drought and a few Prolonged Favors. After that, really do whatever you think's best. We're kind of still figuring stuff out, and the only thing I would keep in mind with what you're currently building is eventually you're probably going to want to work towards the Tenacity set, which means that the current gear you're equipping, you should be thinking about that at all times, right? All right, let's get into amulets and jewelry in general. As we kind of stated, Blood Drinker is phenomenal. I think that what you guys should be using on Blood Drinker is just Keenly Empowered always, because generally tanks are pretty empower starved, which is why you also see me suggesting some slash damages here. And if you want to be on the safer end, leeching is really good. But if you think about sitting in Greatsword and you're in defensive stance, you're going to be very empower starved. So getting a little bit more empower from things like slash damage 2, Keenly Empowered, free value. Now, amulets are insane this patch for you guys because you can basically get stuff like this. Now AGS has told us we're getting diminishing returns on multiple protections on an amulet, but we're not really sure what that looks like yet. So I think there's a little bit more we need to learn about kind of what AGS is going to do with that. And if it is currently in the game, it's something that we don't know about, basically. So yeah. Kind of weird, right? Anyways, amulets are insane because and I would go for stuff like this, right? I think well-being's good. I think a gem slot's good, and as multiple protections as you can get. That's basically it. As far as your earring goes, having these type of a perk combination is basically kind of what you're going to want to look for. I think that if you can get a gem slot, refreshment, or refreshing move with Despise 2 and Regenerating 2, if you can get these 3 fixed perks with a gem slot and then literally anything else, that's going to be your BIS. So this doesn't really need to be Grit Ward here. This could be a skill slot or a defense slot, and that's going to be your BIS probably. So let's just change that real quick. Skill slot, defense slot. And that's what I would be shooting for earrings. As far as minimum gear goes for this, right? Don't overthink it too much, boys. Really, your earring should just be gem slot, refreshment, or RM with Despised. Those are going to be your 3 prio perks. And then for your amulet is very similar, right? Protection, well-being, protection 2, gem slots, any combination of those things are very viable. I will say the last thing that I want to talk about for amulets here is that it's possible that you could just drop a gem slot on your amulet and you could drop well-being too, simply for more protections. I think we need to see what AGS is going to do with the diminishing returns on multiple protections on one piece. And it's really a combination of the content you're doing as well as the gear you can get for what you're going to use, right? So gem slot, protection 2, well-being 2, all very strong. If you guys got more questions on stuff like this, just let me know, but I think we covered as much as I could. When we get into weapons here, weapons are a little bit interesting this patch, right? The big thing, as I said earlier, is that Power Stone is kind of going to be your best option, which really means that you only have to get a greatsword and a sword. And we will talk about shields in a little bit because shields are insane right now. But this is what I would personally consider like a best in slot greatsword to be. I would say that a gem slot for your Carnelian, Trenchant Strikes, Trenchant Crits, and Energizing Counter are best. So a skill slot, right, for that Energizing Counter. We go over here and we type in like Energizing Counter 2. You can basically see that when you activate counter on weapon, you get 32% stamina, and then you also get energized, which is wild. So this basically means your stamina is going to be regenning significantly faster. And when your stamina regens faster, you can continue to block attacks, and you can continue to live, which is your job as a tank. Other like good perks that you could potentially put on your greatsword might be things like Hatred. You could maybe do a defense slot. You could maybe do Trenchant Recovery. Trenchant Recovery is kind of mid because it does have a very long activation cooldown, which I can show you guys right here in New World Buddy. But yeah. So you can see here it has an activation cooldown. So this means Trenchant Recovery is only going to work once every 0.5 seconds. So I don't know. In my opinion, it's a little mid. But you guys can really, you know, we're in an era where grinding loot is going to be luck-based. So just these 4 perks, I think, is what you should be shooting for right now. And then, of course, whatever 5th perk you can get. As far as minimum gear, this is what I think's best right now. Gem slot, Trenchant Strikes, Energizing Counter. Those are by far the top 3 that I would suggest prioritizing. Now, Power Stone, obviously, very simple, very easy. Don't really need to do much here. I did say that Leeching or Slash Damage 2 could be best because these things will both work whenever you have your Greatsword or your Sword and Shield out, free value. And then, of course, you know, Mending Vortex or Crowded Bludgeon, really a preference for you at the end of the day. The only main difference here between a Sword and Shield set and a Greatsword set is basically going to be the perks that you end up using, right? Now, what I mean by that is that skill slots are really good. I'd also say that for most bosses or single target fights, Blood Drinker is bad, okay? So I would drop Blood Drinker basically, and I would use something different. Now, this is a good time to actually maybe use the new Infix Ring, right? And this Infix Ring is something that you can get from chest running. You can get it from mutations, M1s. You can basically get this by playing the game. So since you're dropping Blood Drinker, this now gives you the opportunity to run Unstoppable. And Unstoppable is just going to give you a little bit more grit when you're doing stuff with your light attack, heavy attacks, or Sword and Shield. And this is where you could start running that ring. The main reason why Blood Drinker is not very good for single target fights is because you're already going to be healing a lot from your healer who has Essence Rupture on the boss. And then you also don't want such a base damage reduction with Sword and Shield, which is missing quite a lot of base damage increases already. And that could actually mess with your ability to hold aggro. So I just wanted to bring that up, right? No Blood Drinker for single target fights like bosses. And basically something like something like the new Infix Ring could be viable for you guys. The other 2 things are, right, Accelerated Resolve and Fortifying Shield Rush. These perks are insane, boys. These perks are insane. Anytime you guys are tanking, you should always have these, especially now with how easy it is to get viable gear with these two skill slots. So anytime you guys are doing tanking stuff for single target fights, Shield Rush, Accelerated Resolve, BIS. Always have those as much as you can get. One thing that I really... Oh, and then let's talk about the sword, right? Sword, I kind of want you guys to be thinking a little bit more about utility instead of doing damage. And what I mean by that is that you could do something like Sundering Stacks to apply Rend, Trenchant Rend to apply Rend. Hatred is good simply because it's going to build more threat, and maybe you can change something else out with one of your builds, which is kind of what I'm going to suggest here in a second. You could also use something like Disdained Infliction to extend dots and increase the dot damage of anybody in your group, which is very, very strong. And it's kind of a meta thing to do right now. This is kind of whatever. I think you want keenly empowered no matter what. I wasn't really sure what else to take here, but realistically you could do like a defense slot. you know, you really have options here. Don't feel like you need to be locked into this. I was kind of thinking that keenly empowered would be good here though. So I think we've covered pretty. Oh, so one thing I want to touch on too is that the insurmountable earring is farmable from the PvP track right now, right? And it has incredibly strong perks for tanking, which are refreshing move, refreshment, and a defensive socket, right? So this perk combination is insane. Now the downside of this earring is you can't get despised. You cannot get despised, which is kind of why I'm thinking that you won't want to run this. But at the same time, as long as you can hold threat on single targets, using the insurmountable earring could be incredibly good. On top of that, it would give you opportunity to free up another armor piece up here for something different, and you could always use hatred on your sword, which would make it easier to hold aggro, right? So I'm kind of just bringing up an idea here. I generally don't like dropping despised ever on a tank, but it's very possible that this could be viable only for single target fights, only single target, like bosses, and maybe try it out. But I don't want to say it's good yet because despised on earring is so good, and that's what your goal should be to use as a tank. So I think we've pretty much finished the gear. The last thing we need to talk about are shields, boys. Shields are insane right now. So let's go back to like greatsword tanking as well as sword and shield tanking. But basically, there are a lot of perks that are now considered to be on equip. And basically, I'm going to define this for you guys, all right? But the reason why shields are so insane is because let's say you're doing a greatsword flail tank like this, right? Now, if you have a flail equipped, this means that your sword and shield perks are going to be active. And I'm going to share with you guys a shield that we see right now, okay? All of these perks on this shield are considered on equip. And what that means is that even if I have my greatsword out, like this, even when I have my greatsword out, I'm getting the benefits of keenly fortified, empowered, and all of these protections, which is fucking insane, right? It's insane. So if we look at like what we could do here, you could do something like this basically, where if I go back to my gear sets and you go to your tank build, if you're ever using greatsword, you could do something where you're using like 4 protections and they will basically be active at all times. On top of that, you can get, here, I'm kind of all over the place right now. But on top of that, these are all other perks that are considered on equip. Grit Ward, Keenly Fortified, Enchanted Ward. So you can actually use these on your shield to max out your protections. Now, the thing to look for here, right, is if we look at something like Keen Speed 2, this is a perk that is called on active, which means it needs to be actually out on your main hand weapon to actually proc it, right? So if you guys are interested in checking out New World Buddy, this is something that you can do. So again, Keen Speed on active, you have to have that weapon out for this to proc. But if we look at something like slash protection or slash shield ward, or it's just slash protection 2, right? If you look at something like slash protection 2, this is on equip. So again, if you have this on your shield, I will have permanent uptime even when I'm on greatsword for all of these protections. So you have a ton of value right now with these protections. I can't stress it enough. It's insane. Let's see. I think the last thing that I want to bring up here is that shields are currently bugged. And what I mean by this is that normally when you slot weapon perks into your weapon, the percent value of that perk is going to scale higher, right? And right now for shields, that's bugged and it's not the case. So fortifying shield rush in your shield and in your armor will do the exact same percentage when normally in the shield it should be like 2x the value, right? So if AGS ever fixes scaling, this type of shield right here is going to be your Bisser, which I actually had up in New World Buddy right here. So if AGS ever fixes scaling, this type of shield is basically going to be your Bis go-to. And that's just going to be double skill slot, shield defense, which is insane. Always take shield defense when you're using sword and shield. And then, of course, 2 protections. These can literally be anything. I just had this for the new raid. So if AGS fixes scaling, right, this is your Bis right here. Double skill slot, shield defense, 2 protections. If they don't fix scaling, then you're basically going to be using something like this. Shield defense, fucking 2-3 protections, and then literally whatever the hell you want. Easy. Okay, and then again, right, I have minimum gear for you guys over here, so you can basically see what you should be shooting for at the absolute minimum. The only other thing that I've done here, and I'm going to let you guys take a look at all of this on your own, I think, but there are a handful of round shields that you can go farm from mobs in this game that are like really strong and like basically S tier that all endgame tanks should have. Some of the two main ones are Unrelenting Mercy, which is really good. It basically has protection, fortifying shield rush, and all of these give you value. And once you get to high-end tanking, there's going to be a little bit of a reason to use round shields. One of those reasons is basically going to be right here, like I'll explain, but that's because of the one with shield. So on top of round shields giving you a base damage increase, you're also going to be extending debuffs, which is a little bit of a meta cook and not something we need to explain to new players, but this is something cool that you guys can do if you ever want to farm for BIS stuff. So the two that I would farm are Unrelenting Mercy and Tempered Disruption, and you can kind of check out all of the different round shields that I've put here with different protections. And I have farmed these all because I love tanking. I was once a tank main, and I think it's cool if you guys wanted to do it too. Okay, have I missed anything? Oh, let's go over some examples and some people that you guys can check out. So one of the first examples I wanted to give you guys is, I think the quality is going to be literally dog shit here, so sorry about that. But I wanted to go over some basic information that you guys should be using. And this is more of a play style type of a thing, right? So what we're going to do is we're just going to play this clip, and I'm going to go through it kind of slowly here, all right? Now, one of the things that you guys should always recognize is that as a tank, you want to stay still once you get into a clump. So what you guys are going to see here is I'm going to go into the clump, I'm going to find my spot, and then I'm going to sit there and never move. Let's see what I do. I get a little taunt on these guys initially. You can also see that I pop a Grit Word pot here because I'm pre-popping a consumable to make this clump as easy as possible. I get into my spot, and once I'm in my spot, I AoE taunt, and I immediately rupture. And now, once I'm here, I don't move. As a tank, you don't want to be moving around. You want to be holding your position so that it's very obvious for the group what you're going to do, and it makes it easier for the entire raid. Okay? So again, we get here. I'm just rotating. I heavy for CDR. And then once I get my abilities up, I immediately use them. I get my rupture up, immediately use it, and I'm staying in the same spot, never moving, right? Making it as easy as possible for the group. Easy money. I think there might be another pool that we could look at in just a second here too. So again, let's take a look at another pool, which will, same concept here, right? Just a different pool. And this is all in the new raid. So if you guys haven't seen the new raid, you can give it a little bit of a look, right? But you guys will see I do something very similar, right? So let's watch, right? I go in, I pop my grip pot for safety. I do an initial taunt, getting a little bit of aggro, and I stone form here to eat this big brute slam. And now, because I ruptured, I don't move. I stay still as much as I can, right? I dodge back, which is actually really bad here. I should not do that. Just hold your positioning as much as possible. And now I don't see where the mobs are, how the mobs are on the right side of me and the group is on the left side of me. This means that the mobs could potentially be attacking the group, and I really don't like that. I don't like that at all. So what I'm going to do here in a second is I will probably reposition, and you can see that right here. So Nicole dying, that's my fault. I should have had these mobs better positioned here. But you guys see I do a little bit of a reposition, and then I stand still. So I didn't play this very well, and kind of funneling the mobs is something that you want to do as a tank. But again, you guys can see once I get here, I'm staying still and trying not to move as much as possible. Easy. I think there was only one other clip that I wanted to show you guys now. And that is going to be in a video clip. Let me see if I can find it real quick for you all. I should have my tank aisle build up here. 2-1 taunt. Maybe.
It might just
And I kind of wanted to show you guys something that you can do as a tank as well, and something that you should be thinking about for a lot of these like single target fights basically. But one of the big things is for these fights, you never want to rotate. So what I mean by rotating is that you want to stay very on one side, and you're basically thinking about a linear 180-degree line, right? So you guys can see where I'm at relative to the group right now, and my goal is to make sure this boss doesn't rotate to the left or the right, and he's basically always staying forward on me. So you can see that with my positioning here, that's kind of what I'm trying to do. And that's why I back up, I do some blocks, and I make sure that I'm as basically on that 180-degree line as much as I can possibly be. And that's one of the goals that you guys should always have as a tank. I think there was only one other thing that I wanted to show you guys, and we could maybe go into this a little bit later at some point. Last tip of the day, okay? You guys can AoE taunt before, this is a hella old VOD, but you can AoE taunt before the health bar even shows up. So when you engage in a fight, what I'm going to show you right here is kind of the standard rotation that you should always do in the beginning of a fight, all right? You can taunt before the health bar shows up to guarantee that you get aggro when the health bar spawns. And you can see I taunt here at 925, and the health bar spawns at actually 927. But I already have red bar, and my taunt is already active. Now, just like we looked at the SNS tree before, we already went over that my third light attack does extra damage, and it generates extra threat. So one thing you guys see me doing right away is I always do my third light attack as fast as I can. And now I'm doing a whirling blade for a little bit more damage. Now after this one, I'll probably do a shield rush right here. And what shield rush does is it has a hidden threat multiplier, which will build a lot of threat. It will apply weaken, you will get fortify, and it will do a hidden threat multiplier, which will allow you to easily keep aggro. And you guys can see that, like I said before, I just canceled my third light attack with a shield rush, basically. So again, we're going to do this one more time, all right? You guys should be thinking about always doing your AoE taunt before the health bar spawns. You should be trying to get a third light attack off, as many as you can. And then you should try and shield rush before that taunt symbol wears off. So I got my... You can even shield rush right away if you want. And yeah, that's basically it. So third light attacks, shield rushing, whirling blade, Bisser. Last thing I wanted to tell you guys is that any of the info that I have given you, or if you guys wanted to see actual tank examples, Haywood is a tank that I've been running with for a long time and arguably one of the best tanks in the entire game. I think that there are a few expeditions that you guys can watch from him, like Starstone Barrows, Dynasty. You could watch Ennead, you could watch Savage, but he's an amazing tank to watch to get actual updates on, hey, here's what I should be doing. Here is how I can optimize. Here are some play styles that I can see. And I will basically be linking all of this in the video below for you guys. So I'm going to look at my sheet real quick. Did I miss anything? I think we're good. If you guys have any questions for me, please let me know. I think this was kind of a lot, but we covered everything today. And I will see you all in the next video. Pile, pile, pile.